Hello, this is Andrew Colsky with Stop My OCD and AnxietyEnders.com. Today, we're going all the way sort of out of the US and over into Germany, and we're meeting with Victoria Reichel. And I hope I'm saying it right, Victoria. And Victoria is a PhD scientist who also is living with OCD and has a very interesting story to share with us. So, Victoria, can you introduce yourself further to the audience?
Hello, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm Victoria. I'm 37 years old, and I was diagnosed with OCD officially when I was 16. So I am living with OCD all my life, but knowing that it is OCD is that I know it since more than 20 years. And yeah,
Okay.
that's
Well, I have a lot of questions to ask you about that. And
perfect.
the first question is, so if you were officially diagnosed at 16 years old, how far back can you remember that something was going on even before you were officially diagnosed?
Actually, really early on in primary school, I would say around 7. So I guess when we really start to remember a lot, or after, yeah, I would say around 7, when I had to draw something in my paint book at art class, and I couldn't stop drawing anymore. And I remember drawing and drawing and drawing, and I couldn't stop and started to count for the first time that I remember. And at that point, I kind of felt that it's not okay, but I thought that everybody's doing that and not telling to the others.
Oh,
So I
okay.
thought it's normal and we all doing it. So kind of, yeah.
Wow. So so did your teachers notice anything and say anything to you?
No, just my parents were a little bit confused because I was quite a good student in school. So they were like, why did you screw this painting? Or later on, I had to use a lot of towels in my parents' bathroom because I couldn't, as everybody with OCD knows, you cannot just use one sometimes. So of course, I got some problems with like, why are you using 10 towels? I mean, come on, you have one towel for the day or something like that. So
Wow.
but in school, nobody really, I think I think never ever somebody really realized it if I didn't say it. Yeah. Mm.
So, but if your parents realized that you were using a lot of towels, for example,
Yeah.
how did they react to that?
They were pretty cool because I think I'm pretty lucky. My parents are quite relaxed. So they thought it's kind of a teenage thing or like a child, like a bit of trying boundaries, trying some testing the borders or something. They were not really concerned.
Okay.
When we talked later about it, they told me they were never really concerned about it. No.
So from that experience, that was at about 7 years old, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So what happened next?
So actually, I realized when we were on school holidays that I was incredible homesick. So I had extreme fears, anxiety. I couldn't even stay on I'm from Austria, so we are going to skiing courses. So I was so scared. I couldn't go there. I wanted to just stay home. I was very shy, kind of, in that time, but not because of being shy, just more because of being very anxious. And then I had an incredible biology teacher in school who showed us a video when we were 16 about mental health issues. And one was OCD. And I was like, okay, that's it. I have clearly OCD. So I went to my, at that time, boyfriend and then to my parents, and I just told them, and they said, okay, let's go to a therapist.
Wow.
And
So you
yeah,
recognized it yourself is how you figured it
yes,
out.
yes,
Boy.
because of this video. Yeah,
So
yeah,
so when you went to a therapist,
yeah,
there's a lot of therapists out there who don't know about OCD because they don't really teach it in school, at least in the
yeah,
US. So did your
yeah.
therapist know what OCD was?
I had a therapist who was specialized on anorexia.
Hmm.
So it was for especially teenagers. But she had learned a little bit about it. So she said she is willing to try, but she couldn't guarantee.
Hmm.
And she did it together with a colleague, which was a psychiatrist. So she was on the medical side, and she offered me to start with SSRIs.
Okay.
And I didn't wanted to take a medication when I was 16, but it turned worse. So I kind of agreed with medications from 17 on. So 1 year later, I started to try different SSRIs. Yeah.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
so before you started the SSRIs, were you
Mm-hmm.
doing therapy, talk therapy?
Yes, I had 1 year of talk therapy, and I went through a testing, but I never got like I don't know, like a brain scan or anything. I just went through a kind of normal, how to say, catalog with questions, no?
Hmm. Hmm.
And there they built the diagnosis accordingly to those questions, and
Okay.
yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
so for the 1 year of therapy before you started medication, it was
Yeah.
talk therapy, and you did not do any sort of exposure therapy, right?
No, exactly. No,
Okay. And
only talk therapy. Mm-hmm.
and did you get any benefit at all from the talk therapy?
To be honest, it was of course nice to that I felt understood and that I figured out myself that I have a problem there which could be actually solved. So it gave me a bit of more strength, of course, to live with OCD, but it didn't help the healing process.
Hmm.
But maybe
Hmm.
it was the beginning to also to recognize it, kind of, no? Yeah.
Hmm. So, okay, so you're doing the therapy for a year, you're not getting much help, you then decide that you're going to try the SSRIs. So
Right.
once you started the SSRIs, did you notice
Mm-hmm.
any difference?
Yeah, it was quite. I went through many of them where I even forgot the names because I mean I was writing a little diary at the time. I think there were like 5 to 7 different ones. I had to restart every half a year again because none of them helped me over many years. So I would say from 17 to beginning of 20, maybe 21, 22, there was there were some where I just felt completely high. I was totally knocked out or just laughing or completely tired. I remember falling asleep at a friend's party just because of a wrong maybe dosage and everything. So it wasn't a nice time because I always had to, of course, at that time you also go for party. You had to be really careful combining those with alcohol, and it wasn't
Right?
very. It's very destructive actually first, and then I found one SSRI when I was maybe 23 with a new therapist, and that helped amazingly,
Mhm.
and it helped me a lot to, because at that point I got also a little bit depressed already, because of course you start to think that you don't have a chance to get rid of it.
Right.
Yeah, and then I found one which was fitting for me. So I think there is a big amount of patience what we need to find the right medication, but I think nowadays they're getting better and better. um, and so I found one which worked for many years, but I stopped feeling myself. No, it's
Mhm.
the side effect of the
Yeah,
those kind of medications. So
right.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I am curious, when you
Hmm.
first started with the first
Hmm.
SSRIs, the psychiatrist who prescribed that to you, did
Yeah,
that person have experience with OCD? Do you know?
not really.
Yeah.
I think because at that I remember one thing, that those lady opened a book, like a medical book for all the medications possible. I forgot this name of this kind of the Bible of all the SSRI or psychopharmacas or whatever. And she said, it looks like, yeah, it looks like you have OCD as it is written in this book. So that was for me a sign, okay, she hasn't have met many
Right.
real OCD patients, no?
Yeah.
So I would say there wasn't that much experience. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, the reason I asked the question is because
yeah,
so many times, and again, it's not the doctor's fault or anything. They just don't have the
yeah, yeah,
training in
exactly.
OCD. But the
Mm-hmm.
SSRIs that are used for OCD, in order to
Mm-hmm.
be effective for OCD, the doses are normally much higher than what they normally would be. And
Yeah,
so you'll find cases where a psychiatrist or someone prescribes the right medication, but at way
yeah,
too low of a dose. And then they
exactly,
say, oh, I tried that and it didn't work. It's like, well,
exactly.
weren't on the right
That
dose.
that that's so true. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so
So
true. Yeah. Mm,
that's always an important thing for anyone with OCD to be thinking about, is when they are going
right.
for healthcare, to check with their practitioner to make sure how much experience they have with
Ex-
OCD,
yes,
those types of things. So
exactly.
so you finally got to an SSRI that you felt was helping. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Eventually the side effects were too much for you, but during the time that you were taking it,
Mm-hmm.
how how bad was the OCD? Did it diminish completely? Did it diminish some?
It did. I would say I was kind of improving. Let's say I got rid of the OCD to 65%, if we have to point, which is nice. It was
Sure.
really nice, I have to say. But then something shifted. So I had always the counting and touching and switching on and off, and I don't know, and hand washing. So more physical things.
Hmm.
And at that time, I had a big switch in pure OCD, so POCD, and also my relationship OCD, the ROCD, got worse and worse in romantic relationships. So that was always a very big problem with the OCD. Um, so at some point there was a shift, which was not related, I would say, to the SSRIs. It was just, I think, a, like personal change or whatever.
Hmm.
So I would say I was very happy. But once a therapist told me, "Oh, that's nice. So you don't have to count anymore." Yeah, but what they don't know is what is here can be even worse than counting. No, so I was like, okay, no, that's not true. So in the end, yes, I would say it got better, but at some point the side effects and the me not feeling myself anymore, also all the libido completely
Right.
vanished and everything. I mean, that's not life, right? So
Right.
I was like, no, I don't want that anymore. So I started to slightly reduce it, and I would say like I stopped it completely 8 or 7 years ago. So
Mhm.
I do live without SSRIs now since quite some years. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
But, even during all of these different times and different
yeah,
um, changes and things that you tried, you were able to not only make it through school, but make it all the way through a PhD program.
yeah.
So how
Yes,
did how did that go? How did you deal with your OCD and your homework and the stressors?
yeah. I think, I don't know. I think I'm very stubborn. I'm a very stubborn person. So I was like, okay, I have OCD, but I saw it as my little monster. So kind of if you have a pet which isn't trained pretty well, like a dog which isn't trained or something. So I always saw it, okay, I have it, but I'm not gonna, it already takes me so much from my daily life, so it's not gonna take me my dreams, because it's, I think I really, yeah, I am stubborn person. And I read once there is something, there is this high performing OCD people, which is kind of that you still can do everything, but you still have it. But of course, for me, for a university class, I was studying way more, maybe because sometimes I couldn't read. I had to repeat sentences. So I would say it just took me a little bit of more time. So of course I couldn't go to as many university parties as my friends, but okay, I was like, okay, let's do 2 parties less and 2 nights of studying more, so I could kind of find a balance. Yeah.
Right.
Which, yeah, I found a good balance, I would say. Yeah.
Oh, well, I
So
mean,
it's possible. It's
right. And
possible.
I think that's, one of the lessons here for anyone
Yeah.
watching this video is that,
Yeah.
I get a lot of questions sometimes because I run an OCD support group. And
Yeah.
oftentimes in the support group, people will have questions about, can I hold a job? Will I have any problems, or fears that maybe they'll have problems
Yeah.
with a job? And the answer is there's many, 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 many people who are very successful and happen to
Yeah.
have OCD. So you
That's,
can't let it
yeah.
define you. You can't let it
Yeah.
hold you back. You're
Yeah.
capable of doing the things that you want to do.
Exactly. Which is good. Which is good.
Yes.
Yes.
So I have another question for you, which is, I know you shared with me that you were born in Austria, you lived in
Yes.
France, you're currently living in Germany, and
Right.
obviously you were getting treatment from providers in these different countries. Tell me, compare and contrast the treatment for OCD in the different places where you have received treatment.
So I would say, yeah, so as I said before, I always had the talk therapy, and then with a certain extent with medication or not, no? So mainly I always had a psychotherapist or like a psycholog, how to say that in English?
Psychologist, we have psychologists, we
Psychologist.
have
Thank you.
psychiatrists.
I lost my English. So the thing is, it depended highly, of course, on the person themselves. So I wouldn't say, okay, the French therapist was so different than the Austrian or the German one. Still, I once had this French therapist who was such a big fan of Freud theory, which I wasn't that fond of. So there were different approaches, but in the end, the talk therapy was there. And I have to say, I was overall pretty shocked that it was very hard to find people with OCD experience. So I sometimes had to take a therapist for other specificities, like, for example, pure anxiety or PTSD therapists. But to find someone in all those countries wasn't that easy. So I really had I had a lot of trial and error kind of also, I would say. That was
Yeah.
quite similar in all the 3 countries. Yeah. Yeah.
So did you do any of your own research about OCD?
I mean, I did read a lot. And I started to categorize, and I kind of found out that my ROCD is exactly the opposite as it is described in literature. So I think personally, I mean, also I'm a researcher, so I'm kind of interested in new approaches, but I think that there are even more types and subtypes of OCD, which I think it's obvious it's not yet everything described. So I think there is way more behind that topic as we think. So I would say, I read a lot. My research itself was quite medical application based for some years, during my PhD especially. But I haven't worked on mental disease right now, but I think that would be a very nice way to go for me to to learn more for myself, but also for my my profession. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Mhm.
it's, it's interesting to me that
Mhm.
I've interviewed several people from the UK.
Mhm.
I have people in the support group that come from all over the world. So we've got people from um, Japan, from
Great.
the Caribbean, from like all over the world. And
Mhm.
the approaches and the level of knowledge of OCD is very, very different in different countries.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, uh, well, I think what it is number one, we don't, in my opinion, we don't really know how many people have OCD because I think they're horribly misdiagnosed so much
Yeah.
that,
Right.
they don't make it onto the radar. And,
Yes.
in my own practice, while I do focus on OCD, I still see other patients. And it's amazing to me the number of times that I'll realize that someone does have OCD only
Mm.
because I'm looking for it. And
Yeah.
it's more so than I think we, have numbers to show.
Yes.
And so the more that people become aware of it, the more we can effectively try and treat it and hopefully eventually in school start training people about it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
because otherwise we have people that are, clearly have OCD, but no one recognizes it, and then they don't get treatment, and they go year and year and
Exactly.
year and talk
It-
therapy,
Yeah.
something that just doesn't help.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. That would be great if there would be a bit of more, yeah, support and more, yeah, training for professionals. Exactly.
Yeah.
In because there are so many people living with OCD, and I think, yeah, many of them they really don't know. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Well,
I was quite
that's
lucky to know it that early, to be honest. Yeah.
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 So,
Uh,
a- and you only found out because your teacher happened to show
right.
you a video about it, right?
Right. Exactly. I just one lecture school lesson with an information video of different diseases. So incredible, no? It
Yeah.
was like that was very, very helpful. Yeah.
So that's it's kind of disheartening that people struggle for so many years with OCD because they
Yeah.
haven't been able to figure out what it is. But I am
Exactly.
hopeful that, with the internet and with YouTube and the podcasts like we're
Yeah.
doing here, more
Yeah.
people can become more aware and they can get proper help earlier. And
That's great. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, once you get help with OCD, and I know you told me you have not tried exposure therapy, but
Not
that's
yet.
one of the primary therapies that we
Yes.
tend to have a tremendous amount of success with.
Yes.
There's other therapies as well, um,
Mm-hmm.
but when people get therapy for their OCD, they can
Mm-hmm.
make substantial improvement, and that's really
Exactly.
great that they
Yeah.
can.
Exactly. And that was kind of crazy because I have had, as you can tell, a lot of therapies, and I was pretty clear with my diagnosis, but the exposure therapy was never even mentioned. To be honest, that there was exposure therapy, I just realized not that much time ago, to be honest. Like, yes, I did read a lot. That's why I happened to read about it, but none of the therapists really explained this option to me. So that I found very scaring because my diagnosis was pretty obviously clear. So there was nothing to, yeah,
Yeah,
to,
and that's
that
you
was
know
pretty, yeah,
it it
mm,
it requires special training to be able to do exposure therapy. So
yeah,
therapists have to seek out that training by themselves because no one's going to give it to
exactly.
them. And
Right,
um,
right.
it also requires a therapist with a certain um, comfort level with doing
Yeah,
exposure therapy because you have to be working with the client while you're actually intentionally raising their distress. And a lot of therapists are very
exactly.
uncomfortable with that.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure that's not easy to go through that. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right. So let me ask you this. Assuming that somebody is watching this video and they
Mm-hmm.
are first learning about their own issues with OCD, and they may have fears that, oh my gosh, this is going to hold me back from doing well in school, or it's going to hold me back from getting a good job, and they have fears related to that. What would you say to that person?
I mean, it's completely normal to have this fear because OCD also it is very, of course, stressing and time consuming, but and also very anxiety driven. No, it's really not the easiest thing to have, but it can work if you give it a chance to balance things and also to take it easy. You can reach every goal you want, but even if you reach it 1 year later, it doesn't matter. It's like, okay, I mean, just give it some time. If you need to have some, I don't know, if you have a certain time limit for whatever study, school or something, I think important is to maybe talk to some people of trust, that you have it to get a bit of personal support, maybe that your friends understand why you always come 2 hours later or whatever, that they maybe understand it. So I think to give yourself time and then balance it out a bit. And if there is 1 day or 1 month where nothing works, it's okay. It doesn't screw your dreams or your plans for the future.
Mhm.
So I would say it's really, really possible. And I have been so many times at the point that I was like, okay, nothing is, it's completely impossible. And that's also okay. But then I would say be a bit stubborn and say, okay, it's OCD, but so what? I can still do everything, no?
Right,
It's
right.
possible. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I certainly can appreciate what you're saying there. I agree with you. You
Mm,
can't let it hold you back from living your life. You've got to
exactly.
live your life.
Exactly.
So,
Yes.
well,
Yes.
Victoria, you are an inspiration to others. You've done
Thank
really
you.
well for yourself, even though you've struggled even learning about OCD and then working your way through it, but you're
Yeah.
determined, which I'm, so glad to hear. And we wish you the most success in the future.
Thank
And
you.
I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join us on the podcast.
Thanks. Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for
All right.
inviting me.
Glad to have you. Thank you.
Thanks.